Afternoon, everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Met Council Environment Committee. I'm Peter Lindstrom, the chair, and today is September 12th. It's 4 o'clock. We have a quorum, so we can get started with an exciting agenda, as we always do. And so that is the first thing on the agenda. And second thing is the minutes from August 22nd. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
And motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Nothing on our consent agenda this afternoon, but we have 3 items on our non-consent agenda, including the very first one, 2023-204, revised emergency declaration, 2023-103 for repair of Minneapolis Interceptor 1MN330MH71. There will be a quiz with all these numbers. Holy
Thank you,
cow.
Mr. Chair. I hope I'm ready for said quiz.
I don't even know what I'm reading here. Holy cow, this sounds exciting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. For the record, my name is Tim Wedin. I am the assistant manager, one of the assistant managers with Interceptor Engineering. I'm here to present to you on business item 2023-204, which is a revised emergency declaration for revised emergency declaration 2023-103 for the repair of Minnesota Interceptor, or repair of Minneapolis Interceptor, excuse me, 1MN330 manhole 71. Just a brief reminder, the emergency declaration purpose and process, a declared public emergency is a situation in which the health, safety, or welfare of the public or the safety of the Metropolitan Council employees or facilities is compromised or potentially compromised and requires immediate action to correct. So this is a process that we go through to make sure that we can address deficiencies in our system that might pose a public health or safety impact to the community. So we try to get through, bypass the competitive bidding process to make sure that we're moving quickly on resolving the issue and making sure that we select a contractor that is going to be able to complete the work in a timely fashion under the direction of our council authorized representative. The emergency declaration is then ratified by the Metropolitan Council if the cost to correct the emergency exceeds $175,000. So we've spoken with you about this in the past. Just a brief reminder, the project is located at the intersection of 27th Street West and Girard Avenue in Minneapolis. This is a location where the city's sanitary sewer connects into 1MN330. It's about a block east of Hennepin Avenue in this area. Some information, and we know how much you enjoy pictures, so we wanted to share as many as we could this time. On the left-hand picture shows you the sinkhole when we first started our work on that site. That manhole in the center with the green lid is our structure, so that is manhole 70. The work included a lot of excavation to get to that manhole or get to replacement of the brick structure that was failing of that manhole. The excavation, you can see in the center there, included about a 10-foot diameter shoring system in order to protect or prevent any collapse of materials around there. One of the things that was very complex about this project is that there are a lot of other utilities in this area. You can see on the right-hand side of that center picture, you can see an I-beam there with some yellow tape over the top of it, yellow straps over the top of it. That is supporting a gas main that is in that area. So that's what we're using to support that gas main to keep it from sagging, from falling, from cracking. That center picture, the right-hand picture gives you a view down into that retention system, and you can see way at the bottom there is our manhole, or our pipe. On the bottom side of that, it looks a little bit like pavement, but actually what you're seeing on the bottom part of that that opening, that straight shot across there, is a 54-inch diameter storm sewer, city storm sewer that's in that area. So there's a lot of utilities that we needed to work around. In fact, while we were putting this system in place, we discovered that the storm sewer was closer to our manhole than we had expected. And so we had to really work around that system to make sure that we were still conveying stormwater during the repair of this facility. Left-hand side shows some of the brick that we were removing as we were getting into that manhole. Again, this manhole was constructed back in the early 1900s and was constructed of brick, and so we're removing that sewer brick. The center photo shows cleaning and removal of other debris around that manhole connection or the pipe connection where the manhole was. The right-hand side, you can see where we were creating a form to support concrete so that we could pour a new saddle around, a concrete saddle around that pipe. Once that concrete saddle was poured and cured, we were able to construct a fiberglass manhole on top of that pipe that was supported by that saddle. And then we backfilled to the elevation where the city's sanitary sewer connection was located. It was about 16 feet below ground. To summarize the repair scope and the estimate, the work includes engineering services to support the repair work. We needed people to be able to design the manhole itself to be able to support traffic loads. We needed a structural engineer to design the reinforcement for the saddle, the concrete saddle that was placed. We were also looking for costs for excavation and maintenance hole and the maintenance hole structure itself. Reconstruction of the maintenance hole. Initially, we expected that the cost was going to be around $350,000, and that was what we had our initial emergency declaration for. But as you could see from some of our pictures, there were a lot of other things that we tried not to bump into, but bumped into as we were putting this pipe into the ground. And so that really increased some of the costs as we were moving forward. Final total time and material costs for this project is approximately $430,000. So an additional $80,000 needs to be authorized to cover the actual costs of the emergency repairs. Our proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council revise Emergency Declaration 2023-103 for the repairs of the maintenance hole for Interceptor 1MN330 at 27th Street West and Girard Avenue South in Minneapolis from an estimated $350,000 to an amount not to exceed of $430,000. With that, I'm available for questions.
Questions for Mr. Wedin? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know whenever you start digging, you find surprises, so it's not surprising that you're coming back with an additional fund. Could you just let us know how long it took time-wise from when it was first observed to completion? Because I know it's very complex with that gas line there and the storm sewer, and you have to be so careful with everything that, I think it looks like you guys did a fantastic job, but just the total time it took.
Mr. Chair and council members, as I recall, the initial emergency declaration was issued around, was it April or May of this year? That's what I seem to recall, is about that time was when we issued that initial emergency declaration. I know it was in the spring of the year. Looking through records of what we have, I was seeing work that was still being completed in about August of this year. So it did take us some time to go through and get that repaired. Some of that is because of supply chain requirements. Getting a new manhole, a fiberglass manhole into that location does take us some time. It's not something that we can necessarily get off of a shelf somewhere. It had to be manufactured.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I remember when we had the first declaration, they weren't really sure what happened under there. Did we figure all of that out? Because before it sounded like maybe somebody else's project knocked into ours. And
Mr. Chair and council members, at this point in time, I'm not aware of a determination of why this happened. There certainly are a lot of compounding impacts on what was happening in the area. As we've discussed previously, the city of Minneapolis have been doing some work at that location to revise their sanitary sewer connection. So they had been working in the area. It's an older pipe, so definitely there's been some deterioration in the area, but what caused the manhole itself to open up and allow material into it and create that sinkhole, whether it was the fact that a pipe fell into it and knocked a hole into it, if we just deteriorated and bricks dislodged, I really don't know at this point in time.
Please.
Will we ever know, or is that just going to be a mystery?
Mr. Chair and council members, we can certainly look back through, and I know we have tried to look back through recent televising of that area, recent inspection of that area to try to get a better idea of what it looked like before the activities happened. But those videos could have been far enough before the work activities happened that we may never really know what it was that caused the damage there.
It would be pretty strange for the city of Minneapolis to bash it and not tell us that they bashed it, I imagine, right?
Mr. Chair, I would agree. I wouldn't expect that the city of Minneapolis would knock in a pipe or cause something to happen that would damage it and then not tell us. They're a responsible partner with us. We work very closely with the city of Minneapolis and value their efforts to maintain their system and confirm with us what deficiencies they might see in our system. You know, I can't say that they would have done anything and not told us about it. So, you know, it's, in my mind, this is another unfortunate accident that we all needed to work through.
Very good. Any follow-up? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
This motion's been made and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that takes us to our second item, which is 2023-205, emergency declaration for repair of 7122 Low Head Crossing. Mr. Gordon, welcome.
Welcome, or thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Thank you for having us today. I'm here to present another emergency declaration for the, make sure I get the right things in front of me. For emergency declaration for repairs of a sinkhole on Interceptor 7122 Low Head Crossing of an amount that is not to exceed $2 million. In August 22nd, so a little over a couple weeks ago, MCS staff were notified by MnDOT staff that there was a sinkhole developing in Maplewood, right where a culvert crosses Highway 61. And there's a stream that follows through there. And right behind the head wall to the culvert was a sinkhole forming, and the stream had actually found its way towards that hole, and water was going into the ground. So they were very curious about that and alerted us, so that was good. And we went out and dye tested the stream, and the dye test showed that the dye was actually getting into the sanitary interceptor below. The contractor, I suppose I could advance the slides for you. Emergency declaration process and purpose. Tim Wedin did a very good job of covering that for you, so I won't labor on this tonight. This is the location of where the sinkhole was on Highway 61, just south of Beam Avenue. And we have some pictures that show that sinkhole. In the first picture, you can see the hole from the surface. The picture below, the staff person is pointing up the head wall into where that hole had developed. And then we selected Minger Construction Company to come out, and one of the first things they did was drive that piece of steel sheeting and sandbag to try to prevent the creek from further flowing into the interceptor. Since then, we've televised, cleaned the pipe, and I was on the phone just an hour ago with crews. They've made a man entry into the low flow or the low head crossing, and have been trying to, they've located where the hole is in the pipe. They've grouted above that hole to try to stop the inflow of more groundwater and water into that hole. They've tried cleaning, but the top of the low flow structure is very badly corroded, and they were unable to clean it very much. The word I got back was their wire brush was actually going right through the pipe. So I wanted to stop a little bit because there's a little bit of jargon here. Low head crossing. So this is an area where our interceptor pipe, and unfortunately we don't have a diagram, so I'm going to pantomime what this looks like. Our interceptor pipe approaches a culvert that has a stream in it, and the culvert's basically in the way. So what the designers did was they designed a series of smaller pipes at the bottom or towards the invert that pass under the culvert and then connect with the interceptor flowing downstream. So these series of pipes, there's 4 of them. They're constructed of corrugated metal pipe. They were constructed back in 1976. And probably the same time that the culvert was constructed, although there's some indication in the drawings that the culvert actually existed there first, so they might have been driven underneath the culvert. Upstream, there's a larger box, a head box as we call it, and downstream there's another access box called a tail house or tail box. So from within those structures, we're able to access likely what will happen as time goes on here. Since we have the temporary conveyance set up and we have everything cleaned up, we'll likely line those 4 sections of pipe with CIPP, but we're still waiting for some cost information and some supplier information by the end of the week. So here's a list of the work we've done to date. We've had engineering services to look at the pipe and review the type of repair we can do. We have the temporary conveyance set up. We've cleaned, televised, and inspected the pipe. We'll look at surface restoration once we've repaired the pipes. And we've estimated the cost at $2 million. One of the things about the cost, when we put together an emergency deck, we literally have hours to put that together. One of the things I recognized was that this pipe, which services the whole northeast region, all the way up to Forest Lake, we have about 4.5 millions of gallons a day on a dry weather flow, average flow that comes through the system. So the temporary conveyance is not a small feat and would be costly. So we're going to try to repair the pipes while we have that item set up. And with that, our proposed action for tonight is that the Metropolitan Council ratify the attached emergency declaration for repairs of the sinkhole and Interceptor 7122 low head crossing in an amount not to exceed $2 million. And with that, I'm sure you'll have questions.
I have one. Does it make sense to do a cured in place on corrugated metal pipes that are almost 50 years old as opposed to just replacing them entirely? And I don't know that cured in place, it kind of makes a new pipe in and of itself. But is that more cost effective? I imagine it's more cost effective than getting an entirely new pipe. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Mr. Chair, so been in many phone calls in the last 2 days to just talk about this particular subject. Waiting to find out from field staff in particular just what the conditions of the pipe, can the pipe persist until we get a capital project in place to do the full repair. And hearing back that the crown of that pipe, and I wish I had pictures, I do have pictures now of the crown of the pipe, that it's perforated all the way through the length of the pipe, and there's water that's now seeping in other places other than the first sinkhole that we have. The fact that they can basically peel it away with a wire brush, meaning that it's basically soils and the culvert above that are holding everything up in the air. So pretty high risk. And if we were to engage in a capital project outside the emergency declaration, where our projects are taking 3 to 5 years to go through. So that wouldn't be prudent at this time or wise at this time, I don't think, to start a capital project. We need to stabilize the situation now. Cured in place pipe, at first I thought, oh, well, this is going maybe a little overboard just to correct a problem, but after the reports back today from the field, this would be a good way to stabilize the situation. We will be looking at the tail house and the head house as part of a new capital program, as well as the crossing to make sure that it doesn't. One of the issues with this is we inspected this pipe back in 2015, and we found the condition to be fair, but we couldn't actually inspect those corrugated metal pipes that cross underneath the culvert because they're nearly submerged all the time. So it was on our radar to, in fact, we had incorporated into an inspections program to look at it this coming year. Another case of something that's in the capital program, and we didn't quite get there in time, which I have a lot of issues with. But knowing that we have these things out there and the conditions are in very poor shape, and warrant something now to, like I said, there's 4.5 MGD of average daily flow and quite a bit more for peak flows. A failure at this point would have serious consequences all the way up the line for service, and would be very, very costly to try to repair after it collapses. Whereas right now, we're looking at everything is all set up and cleaned and ready for insertion of the CIPP, and I'm looking at that being relatively inexpensive. It might only be a few $100,000 to get that work completed.
Makes sense. Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Wolf first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you said, we've been having a few of these where they were on the radar and didn't make it. What are we going to be doing different?
Mr. Chair, so, a couple sessions ago, I thought it prudent to bring forward our programs that we started to really formalize and make sure that we're catching up with these sort of things. In the past 20 years, our inspections programs have been to check what we can check, but in areas that were really difficult, we didn't have the resources or the tools to go in to some of these areas. Now that we have more of a program approach, and we're willing to hire contractors to look at these things, and we've programmed things over the next 10 years to catch up. I won't say we won't have any more emergency declarations, but I think it's the sign of an aging system. And I've had to wrestle with it because when I first came on board, we didn't have any emergency decks, but now we're having lots of emergency decks. Well, we haven't had hardly any emergency decks, just a handful in the last 4 years that I can think of until we got to this year, and now we're experiencing all these emergency decks. So I think we already put into place the programs recently too, in the last 3 years, to try to tackle these sort of things. And we put things into the capital program. This pipe got into the capital program last year for inspection. We are having bottlenecks with our consultants. You recently approved an MSA for $54 million for reinvigorating and getting better bench from consultants. We're adding 2 new consulting companies to our list of who we can use. And we're having serious discussions with each of those companies about their resources and make sure that we can get there, as well as we've hired 3 people in the last 2 months. So we're gearing up to do more work, and we want to push these programs as hard as we can to try to get ahead of the ball.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cedarburg, you had a question.
I have the same question as Councilmember Wolf, but I just wanted to understand this as well. So we're doing an emergency, not to exceed 2 million, get it stabilized, high-use pipe, and then it's going to go back into the capital project to kind of restabilize it and rebuild the whole line in that crossing,
With,
the head and the 2 heads?
right, Mr. Chair, along council members, now that we're putting CIPP for the actual pipes that cross, I still see deficiencies.
Yep.
And that it's hard to inspect the system. And so I'm thinking there probably will be changes at least to the tail house and head house boxes, the access structures, so that in the future we can inspect these on a more regular basis going forward.
Thank
And
you.
that would be very important to us. So as we fix things, we're also thinking about the future, and we're thinking about our program efforts to make sure you can inspect everything every 10 years or 15 years, depending on pipe type. Can you get into it? And right now, it was very difficult to get into this pipe. We noticed that there was a lot of sedimentation in these pipes. And that's because there is no flow control through the head house and tail house. So we'll be making improvements for sure to make sure we get better hydraulics through these structures and control flow and can do the inspections we need to do to prevent this from happening in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
A second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that takes to our third item on our non-consent agenda, which is 2023-208 Empire Polymer Contract. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Cute presentation.
Just went dark on you.
I see.
There we go.
All right. My name's Elizabeth Schrandt, and I'll be presenting on the Empire Polymer contract. Oh, I work in process engineering, R&D, and air quality under operations support services. So polymer is used as a conditioning chemical to treat the sludge that is generated at a wastewater plant. And sludge is a word for the solids that are generated at a wastewater plant. And sludge at Empire comes from 2 sources: primary sludge, which is when the raw wastewater is allowed to settle and solids settle out, and then secondary sludge, which is where we waste a certain amount of microorganisms continuously to maintain a healthy biological population to remove nutrients in our activated sludge aeration tanks. So polymer is mixed with that sludge, and the picture here shows the beaker on your left, hopefully, is sludge without polymer, and it shows the sludge is kind of evenly mixed in there, the solids. And then the picture on the right is polymer mixed with that sludge, and you can see the water starting to form on the top and sludge starting to settle on the bottom. So the product that we would be purchasing is made of mineral oil, polyacrylamide, and water in an emulsion, liquid emulsion. And it causes the solids particles to stick together or flocculate together, and then the water can more easily separate out. So we use this polymer on 2 different pieces of solids processing equipment, the gravity belt thickeners and the belt filter presses. And these are mechanical sludge treatment equipment. And the same polymer is used for both of these pieces of equipment. For the gravity belt thickeners, here's an illustration of how it works. So this is used on waste-activated sludge, so those are those microorganisms, and the sludge gets mixed with polymer, and then it gets fed onto a moving belt, and the water flows down through the belt, and the sludge stays on top of the belt and then gets thicker and thicker until it's at a concentration about 6% solids where it's appropriate to be sent to anaerobic digestion. And then it's called thickened waste-activated sludge, or TWAS. And a belt filter press, which we also use Polymer for, is taking sludge that has already been digested and starts at about 2.5% solids and gets mixed with polymer, also gets fed to a moving belt, and then also water flows through the belt and the sludge stays on top of the belt, but then it gets sent in between two belts, and the rollers will push those two belts together. The sludge stays in between the two belts, the water gets squeezed out, and then that ends up at about 12% solids after that process, which then it's ready for economic storage, hauling, and land spreading. And at the Empire plant, solids are ultimately land applied. Well, first they're sent to a pad where they can dry a little bit more outside, and then they are land applied on agricultural fields. So to procure this chemical, we went through a two-step process. First, we did an invitation for pre-qualification starting in December, and we allowed manufacturers to bring their chemical and test them full scale on these pieces of equipment. And then the products that met our specifications and worked well with the equipment were allowed to bid. And we got bids, or we put out the invitation for bids on July 10th. We received bids from 3 different companies, and those were opened on August 10th. Polydyne Inc. was determined to be the lowest responsive responsible bidder and met qualifications. So over 5 years, we expect to spend about $2.4 million on Polymer. And the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity did not set an MCUB goal for this contract. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 22P349A with Polydyne Inc. to provide polymer to the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant in an amount not to exceed $2,399,000. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Schrandt? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought it was really interesting that you let them come in and actually test their chemicals on the plant, because, wow, that's such a great idea to do that. Couple questions is, do you use the same process in the winter of just spreading it out and putting it over the snow, or how do you deal with it all in the winter? That's one question. And then the second question I had was, for the sludge that's remaining on the pad and stuff, how much of, is the polymer still detected that's land spread, the naphtha, or is that kind of gone?
Yeah, I'll answer your first question first. So the sludge is, or the biosolids, it then becomes biosolids,
Right.
Are land applied in the spring and fall. During the winter, they are stored on the pad.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your first
Yep.
question. And for the second question, I do not know of any testing that we're not, I don't think we've tested for mineral oil in the land applied solids,
Okay.
but I can
I
double check.
thought you had to land apply, you had to kind of know what it was, but you've done it, if you've done it once and it's consistent, then
Do you know the answer off the top of your head, or should I check and get back?
you can get back to me.
Thanks, I'll get back to you.
Always be safe and just say,
Yep.
we'll check into that.
All right.
Thank
Or you
you.
could just guess. That works too.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I was wondering about the polymer. You know, sometimes we hear about different chemicals and how they're really hard to procure. There may be only one company or two companies that supplies this particular chemical. So I'm thrilled that we got 3 bids. Are there we're clearly not facing the same sort of challenges that we are with other sorts of chemicals that we use in the plant. Are these all local companies, or are these national companies, or are there a lot of polymer companies that I'm not familiar with, or?
I can get you some more detailed information on the companies and where they operate out of. But yeah, we're also pleased to have gotten the
Yeah.
different companies.
That's great. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a super duper cool process. So
Yeah.
if you get the chance to go out to the Empire plant and watch, it's really neat. But it's the same kind of deal as if you're trying to clean your pool and you put the clarifier in there. Same thing. So that's why it's maybe easier to find than some of the other more obscure chemicals that we need for our other processes. But yeah, it's really cool. And we just did improvements to the pads out there to have more space for storing more
I remember that.
biosolids. And I would move approval.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions, by the way.
And that takes us to our two information items. The first one is the proposed Metropolitan Council Triennial EPA DBE goal. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Mr. Chair, Council and committee members, Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And I am pleased to be before you today to present on the proposed EPA Triennial goal. So just as a little background, the federal program to create a level playing field for disadvantaged business enterprises called the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. In 2019, the Environmental Protection Agency suspended the requirement to set a 3-year goal. However, in the interest of transparency, accountability, and consistency, we operate our EPA DB goal in accordance with 49 CFR Part 26, which is the same regulations that govern our FTA DBE goal. The overall goal represents the anticipated DBE participation based on projected expenditures over a 3-year period. And it is applied and measured each fiscal year. The overall goal is not a quota, so it is a goal, and we do our best efforts to meet our goal each year that we establish it. One of the things that is required as part of putting together your goal and goal methodology is that the maximum feasible portion must be achieved using race and gender neutral means, meaning that by means where you don't establish a goal on a project. So we count race and gender neutral participation in instances where there is no goal that we establish on a project, however, and we still get DBE participation. And we also count race and gender neutral participation on projects where we have established a goal, but we achieve a higher percentage than was met, than required to meet the goal. So the mechanisms that we utilize to achieve our overall goal are setting contract-specific goals, and we have contract specifications that outline the process of how we do that, how we measure, and how we count it. And a project goal is probably rarely or never equal to the overall goal because it is project-specific and based on those factors and availability of DBEs to do the work. Our current triennial goal that we've been operating under the last 3 years is 11%. And just as a perspective, here's our last 3 years of goal achievement, well, 2 years. 2021 was 10.58%, and 2022, 16.7%. And we will be reporting on our 2023 numbers in October. So the proposed goal for our next 3 years of 2024 through 2026 is 11.9%, with a race-conscious portion being 5.4% and a race and gender-neutral portion being 6.5%. And what I would say that jumps out, other than the overall goal, is that it is rare to see the race and gender-neutral portion higher than the race-conscious portion. However, that is due to a couple of factors. We had a high number or percentage of projects where we did get race and gender-neutral participation in those scenarios that I outlined, where we either didn't set a goal, but we still were able to achieve DB participation, or DB participation that exceeded the goal that was established. So the methodology that is used, you have to determine the availability rates in a well-defined geographic market area, and then produce any adjustments to the base DBE goal, and then propose that, again, maximum proportion that can be achieved using race and gender neutral methods. One thing that I would like to mention is this is the first time in the council's history that we used a third party, an outside consultant, to conduct our methodology. Several reasons for that. One, it creates a level of objectivity and transparency in the work, and we have been received feedback in terms of both from the vendor community and our advisory committees, our equity advisory committee, that this is a best practice to be considered in establishing our goal. So this chart really shows, is part of the discussion that we had with the vendor, the consultant, which was the University of Minnesota and the Roy Wilkins Center. Dr. Myers and his team presented these options for us. And these were options that were presented based on their methodology. They would, in practice, use 5 legally defensible methods to conduct their goal analysis. And one of the things that they were concerned about was the limited amount of data in some of these methods that were proposed. So using the 5 methods would compute a goal of 25.6%. And that would be using the 5 methods plus the adjustment and using the historical data. Ultimately, we chose option number 4 in utilizing the 3 methods with the adjustment. Reason being, again, the limited amount of data and information from the other 2 methods. An example that would demonstrate this is over the past period that was reviewed and part of the calculation, we had 1 DBE that was awarded a prime contract, and they bid on a prime contract 3 times. So that would, even though that was the same DBE and it was only 3 jobs, that would compute to a success rate of 33%. And extrapolating that out, there were 55 prime contracts. I'm going to use the number 48 because the math is easier for me to do in my head. That would assume that they would have gotten 16 projects, the same DBE. And the same existed in our subcontracting data. We don't get a lot of bidders, prime and DBs, so using those methods produced some very high availability rates. So we did not choose the method just because the number was high. I want to make that clear. The other options that existed to us were we could have just averaged those 4 proposed options. However, that would have been kind of sweeping under the rug some of the issues that we saw with the data in the sample size, the low sample size. I should go back. I want to talk about the adjustment as well. There is an adjustment made to the base goal to account for disparities in prime and subcontract awards that cannot be attributed to differences in industry, location, firm size, credit risk, or other characteristics of a DBE versus non-DBE contracts. And we call that the but-for discrimination adjustment, and that number was 19.9%. So we also wanted to provide some data just to kind of comparison. If we used our old method that we've been using, which is a pretty basic method, what our base goal would, or what our goal would have been versus using Dr. Myers in the University of Minnesota, it would have been 13.92%. And again, that is due, we have previously used the DBE method, which again, that 1 out of 3 kind of calculation is a direct result of that DBE method. But we wanted to provide, just for transparency, some comparison so folks could actually see what the difference is. Myself and Dr. Myers will be presenting on this to Management Committee on September 13th. And Dr. Myers will be presenting the goal to the EAC on September 19th, and it will be brought back to Management Committee and full committee on October 25th for approval. We are in a public comment period currently, even though, again, the EPA does not prescribe like the FTA does that we have a comment period. However, again, we're consistency, transparency, all those things. Any of your constituents or folks that you think would be interested in this information, please pass along. We also have a public participation hearing occurring this week as well, if they're not available to tune in to any of those presentations, and provide comment to us, and either through that venue or written comment is also an option for folks to provide their feedback. With that, my presentation is complete, and I will answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Payne, I just want to thank you for your explanation. This is different, and I didn't understand why it was different than what we've done before. And I majored in math in college, but the reading through this was clear as mud to me on what was going on. But now that I listened to your presentation, I fully understand what you were presenting to us. So thank you very much for a very clear presentation.
You're welcome. Mr. Chair, Council and Committee members, that's always a concern I have is hopefully I'm articulating it in a way that can be understood and digested so folks understand it.
Even for non-math majors like myself. Councilmember Cedarburg.
I have a comment, and again, thank you. It was easy to understand. But it's like a lot of numbers we use. I mean, it's like 11.9%. Is nothing rounded to like 12%, you know, or 11.54. I mean, the significant figures that are bound in all these calculations, it just seems, I don't know, it just seems, you know, that rounding to some whole number or 0.5 or something. I understand the use of significant figures, and when you're adding, and if you're rounding, and if you're truncating out 3 significant figures, what is that a real number, or if that's just the way the council uses, they get a number and they use it and they're not going to modify it. But it seems to me 12% is an easier number to deal with than 11.9 or some of the past numbers with 2 significant figures. It's just a comment. Is
that something the EPA asked for, or did we come up with that one on our own?
Mr. Chair, Council and Committee members, believe it or not, this was a conversation that we had.
Yes.
So, so I did ask Megan Solberg, who is the manager of our small business unit, to just look at the regulations and see if there was anything in there So what I will say, it is at our discretion, the council. So ultimately, in the end, we may just decide to round it up, but just, especially when you're working with academics, and for clarity and transparency, this is the number based on how the calculations and the methodology that they use. But ultimately, the decision will be the council's. And I would lean probably that's what we would do.
And kudos for using the U of M. That's the Humphrey School, correct? Dr. Myers?
Yes.
Yeah, and the Wilkins Center. So agree wholeheartedly that taking it out of our hands and putting it into a third party just makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like the vendors had some feedback on this whole process and can continue to give feedback through this open comment period. But did I hear you say that the vendors themselves have had a chance to weigh in on this or have weighed in on this?
Mr. Chair, council and committee members, we have been receiving comments as of August 28th, and we'll continue through that 30-day period. So we have been receiving written comment, and we also give this information, executive summary, to organizations like the AWC, the Association of Women Contractors, also the National Association of Minority Contractors, Midwest Division, for them to circulate to their members and provide comment as well.
Great. Any other comments? Very, very helpful. Thank you very much. And that takes us to our last information item, Water Policy Research Project. Welcome back to both of you.
Hello.
Hello, hello. We meet again.
Meet again. Hello, Mr. Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Jen Kostrowski. I'm the Assistant Manager of Water Policy and Planning. And joining me today is...
I'm Emily Schoen, an engineer in wastewater planning and community programs.
So we are going to start off the front of this conversation with the same slides that we've been showing, again, just to center and frame this conversation. But the content changes. So today we are going to go a little bit over planning, the water planning overview and framing this conversation. And then today we are going to dive into the juicy topic of wastewater planning and service considerations. So this is actually an exciting one, and I'm happy that Emily's here to help me tell
They're
the
all
story.
exciting.
They're all excited. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So here we go again. The Water Resources Policy Plan. It is a part of the larger Regional Development Guide, and it helps us focus on ensuring sustainable waters for the region. It helps provide the framework for integrative water planning. So that does mean taking water supply planning, water resources planning, and wastewater planning and services, and thinking about the work that we do holistically. This plan will commit the council to take action in the areas of long-range visioning and planning, regional system investments, facility management, technical assistance, research and assessment, and partnership. So there's a lot in there. And usually when we get to this point in the conversation, I just show you that we have a deadline, and unfortunately we cannot push it. This is one of those fast and hard and firms. But today I actually want to share a little bit more about that first box that says create research papers, because I think I have shared with you that the number of staff that have put together these papers and have put in a lot of time, but the part that I have not necessarily shared with you is the other steps and other input that have helped create these papers. And so I do want to give a little insight into when the authoring teams create the papers, we also do share them with our water advisory group, which is an advisory group that is made of 21 local water professionals from the region. We have 7 that are focused more on the municipal wastewater system. We have 7 members that are focused more on thinking about regional water supply. And then we have 7 watershed administrators. And so with their help and their input, that helps to guide the contents of our papers. And so I want to just, again, reassure you and frame that we are doing engagement with these papers. And when you read these papers, it is a lot of what the council's perspective is, but we have engaged with locals to ensure that we're bringing some of that local perspective through. That being said, these are papers that are to start discussion. And even with those 21 advisors, we still miss things. So that's why we're coming to you to get your perspective and to engage with that discussion as well. So it's a little, I don't know, it's pushing it all into one box is just not fair to the process. And so I wanted to share a little bit more insight into what that process was. So through this process, we have engaged with our water advisory group and other advisory groups, including MOSAC, which is our water supply advisory group as well. So I don't want to not give them credit because their input also has helped guide the contents with these papers. So working with our advisory groups, we have developed these 7 different topic areas that we decided to focus on for our policy research. We have gone through the journey of the first 3, and we are now at number 4. So if I also want to say that means there's only 3 ahead of us. So our time is short. And we will start, hopefully, after having the baseline policy, I want to say this is a policy primer or a water resource or water issue primer. That's when we're going to get into the policy conversations, which, again, I'm looking forward to. It's going to be exciting. And so with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to the woman who led this team.
Thank you.
Please share the story.
Yes, happy to. Thank you for having us here again. So before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the other authors of this paper. It just reiterates that it was a team effort guided both by the staff expertise as well as our advising groups and committees. And our other authors were Kyle Colvin, Terry Gilchrist, Anna Bessel, and Emma DeVilla. All right, for some background, I'll present a slide that I know many of you have seen by now. But our wastewater conveyance and treatment system is vast and complex. We have over 600 employees who work hard every day to help ES protect public health and safety, protect the environment, and foster the economic growth of the region. The Met Council by statute has the planning authority over wastewater service in the 7-county metro, which includes both service through the Interceptor conveyance and treatment systems, as well as private waste treatment systems like individual subsurface treatment systems. So our beginnings go back to 1969 when the Metropolitan Sewer Board was established, and it incorporated the Minneapolis-St. Paul Sanitary District and 33 treatment plants of the suburban communities into one organization responsible for the entire region's sewage treatment. We are now down to 9 regional wastewater treatment plants with excellent records of compliance. There are many topics are you laughing at our slide? There's a lot of topics we could discuss regarding wastewater planning and service considerations. And we have our issue statement on the screen. I won't read it. It's quite long, but some of the topics that it addresses include aging infrastructure, wastewater treatment for various contaminants, system capacity, and how we plan for growth. And again, you can reference this at another time. These key messages are really important, and we wrote these after writing the paper as kind of the highlights, blurbs that summarize our commitments and what's in this paper. So again, I won't read them, but I do ask that after the meeting you read them and share them, because these are kind of our goals for this paper. And then our role in regional wastewater collection and treatment, I mentioned this earlier, but wastewater treatment is addressed in council statute. So we partner, plan, and provide services to protect our region's water, and we protect and manage water resources, collect and reclaim wastewater, all to serve our region and meet our statutory obligations. All right, so now into the key issues of this paper. We highlighted 7 issues. It's not an extensive list of concerns or considerations for the policy plan. As with all the other research paper topics, items not addressed in these papers are not excluded from being incorporated into the 2050 water policy plan. I will start by just providing some details on a few of these issues, and then for more complete information, I'll direct you to the research paper. So the first one is inflow and infiltration, and I know that these images are familiar to you. The bottom two show are examples of inflow and infiltration of water flowing into a maintenance hole and a pipe. And then the top picture is the result of unaddressed inflow and infiltration when a major washout occurred after 16 inches of rain I'm gonna forget the year, after a superstorm event. As a quick refresher, inflow and infiltration is the clear water, so storm and groundwater that enters the wastewater conveyance and treatment system. It can enter from cracks or breaks in the sewer pipes as well as direct connections. The Met Council and our local communities have invested millions of dollars into repair and rehabilitation of wastewater infrastructure to remove I&I from the system, and it has been successful. We've been able to defer capacity improvements estimated at $1 billion thanks to the hard work on I&I mitigation. The growth of the region has also been accommodated without needing system expansion because we are removing this clear water from the system. The low-hanging fruit of public infrastructure mitigation has been targeted over the years, so now it's time to put more support towards the efforts of private property inflow and infiltration mitigation. This is clear water that enters the system from private properties, and these repairs can be expensive, and not many homeowners know that they are contributing I&I to the system or even have an issue with their sewer lateral. And the storm was 1987. Another issue I'd like to highlight that's in the paper is related to our liquid and Vector waste receiving sites. As a quick definition, liquid waste includes domestic waste, so that's like septage, holding tank, portable toilets, grease trap, etc., and some industrial waste. And Vector waste includes the solids that are removed from the sanitary sewer facilities, most often during cleaning operations. So Vector waste has grit, sludge, fats, oils, grease, rags, etc. Our liquid waste receiving sites are shown on the map. Over the years, we have eliminated other sites across the region due to low flows in that area that don't help the material get carried downstream. Many rural treatment facilities have also closed their disposal sites. So since then, we have heard concerns from liquid waste haulers about the decreasing number of sites. Vector waste, on the other hand, can only be disposed of at the Metro plant in St. Paul. Concerns arise during flood conditions when the Metro plant is inaccessible. So some implications of closed disposal sites include not meeting our customer needs for waste disposal and treatment, Vector waste being disposed of in other areas of the collection system that aren't meant to handle that type of waste, and a need for environmental services to have agreements with other cities for disposal during flood conditions. So the wastewater conveyance and treatment system impacts many of our current policies, which are listed on the screen, and the connections just show the complexity and breadth of our system. Now into the new policies, I'll start with the new ones that we're recommending. The first is wastewater surveillance, and this policy is that the Met Council will support efforts to investigate if or how environmental services can assist in wastewater surveillance in the interest of public health insights when the need arises and funding is available. The Met Council will continue to partner with public health agencies and remain aware of when the Met Council can provide insights. And this policy was recommended after our partnership with Minnesota Department of Health, University of Minnesota Medical School, and the University of Minnesota Genomics Center to better understand COVID-19. So this policy just shows that we are still willing to partner with our local agencies to protect public health. Another new policy is related to contaminants of regulatory concern. And I know there has been questions about this topic, and you'll get more information at another presentation. But I just want to highlight that this policy specifically focuses on the wastewater implications of contaminants of regulatory concern. So again, just high level, we'll continue to partner and engage in research. And this policy in particular has specific recommendations related to nitrogen and PFAS. And I won't read these. They will be available for your reference and more information in the research paper. But it's, we have some guidance for what's upcoming and how we would like to engage with this. A newish policy is actually a reinstated policy from the 2030 policy plan about Interceptor ownership transfer. And we propose to bring this one back so that there is more clarity when the need arises for this policy. There is some criteria in the report, which is the same as what was in the 2030 policy plan. But we recommend bringing this one forward again just to have it available. All right, and I'm going to breeze through the last couple slides. They are how the wastewater paper impacts our current policy and any recommended changes. So the first one is the water conservation and reuse. We are not recommending any changes from the wastewater perspective to this specific policy, but we do acknowledge and support that decreasing water consumption is an effective way to preserve or recapture hydraulic wastewater system capacity. Next is our serving the rural area policy. And we make decisions on rural wastewater service based on whether they provide a regional benefit. And the previous policy used the word regional benefit. We chose to define what that means in the context of wastewater service. So the bold text is the recommended change to this policy. That again just provides clarity for what is a regional benefit from our perspective. So again, it's not a council-wide definition, just from the wastewater perspective. And private wastewater systems, no changes, but we do have a proposed action that will be available for review. Similar with investment, no changes to the investment policy, but more implementation actions that we can pursue. Almost done. Wastewater sustainability, again, no changes, but we do acknowledge that this might change as we will be taking direction from the Climate Action Work Plan in drafting the 2050 policies. And our inflow and infiltration policy, the changes that we're adding and treatment systems into the policy language to acknowledge that the treatment systems are an area where I can enter our system. And a few more recommendation actions or proposed actions for this policy. And it includes, more funding support, private property, grant implementation, and again, the Climate Action Work Plan will guide some of those policy language or actions. All right, last one, finance. Again, no changes from the wastewater perspective, but we do have some proposed actions to add and discuss this go around. So I did go through that fairly quickly. I can always flip back if anyone has questions or wants to read a slide. But now it's time for some discussion and wondering if you have questions, if we're missing anything, if anything is sticking out.
Questions, thoughts, anything sticking out? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The slide on the private wastewater systems, so, you're asking, have constituents raised concerns in your district? I got another call. So a lot of these in District 11, which is north, west rural, were installed 15, 20 years ago, and they seem to be at the end of their lifetime. Some are close to being some of your locations, and some are far away. So I'm just saying that this is going to be a bigger issue going forward. And, I understand the not to provide financial support to assist communities if these systems fail because it's under MPCA, but I think it would be, I know you guys provide support, in guidance and technical support. So it's just one of those things where maybe it's too stringent on, will not provide financial support, could be construed no support, but I know that they come to me, they come to the district sector rep, so you do provide support to them with information. And I think that that's a good thing, and then if it comes, what's the feasibility of connecting? Well, you're gonna need 10 miles of pipe, 5 miles of pipe, you might as well go private, you might as well do this. And so that you do provide some support, and so I just want to make sure that doesn't look like it's zero support on that one, because you have a lot of knowledge, and I have a system that's really close to one of your trunks, and so they may be coming wanting to hook up, so.
Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you for that comment. We can revisit the language and maybe provide more clarity of what support is available and what
Right, I
what
mean,
we
you're
can
not gonna
offer.
build them, you're not gonna pay to
Yeah.
hook it up, but you do provide support in a soft way.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I do want to also just reiterate that these were the recommendations in the research papers. I want to hear this, though, when we come to talk about finalizing the policy language as well.
Okay.
So continue to hold us accountable and with these comments. Thank you very much.
Other items? First of all, I really like how One Water is one of the core principles. I think it's the first core principle. It is the first core principle that you call out, this idea of integrated water management. I'm all in favor of that. I suspect when you come back in a month or two, I think the next conversation is on water quality. So we may talk more about things like PFAS and nitrates and how chloride is doubling. We heard that presentation at this committee a few months ago. I really like the idea of using our wastewater and wastewater systems to have dual benefits. We just heard a few minutes ago about how at Empire, they apply the biosolids onto egg fields, a dual benefit. How we do anaerobic digestion to benefit ourselves by lowering our utility bills. How we're exploring energy recovery and with St. Paul district heating, and how wastewater surveillance is a dual benefit as well. So I suspect you call that out in some way. Well, you do call out the wastewater surveillance, but really just making a point of that we want to double down on that as much as possible. I think I would love to see that. So 2 thumbs up so far. I admit I haven't read the paper yet, but I think you're heading in the right direction for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things that jumped out at me. Wastewater surveillance sounds really creepy.
We know where you live.
And one thing that popped into my head about your proposed action that is on the screen right now, when I was reading through the information, sometimes connecting is not the best solution, even if people's systems are failing. When I was on the Lakeville City Council, we bought 2 houses and tore them down because it was cheaper to buy the houses than to extend sewer to them, and they were right next to Lake Marion with holding tanks. They didn't even have a septic system. You know, I mean, these were old houses, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense to, and sometimes you got to do the hard thing and just, the city buys them and turns that land into something else because you just can't find a cost-effective way to serve them.
Our comment. And Mr. Chair, Committee Member Wolf, I promise we'll look at different words besides surveillance.
Health surveillance? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure we could brainstorm on what the right words would be there.
And we will.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. And I believe that takes us to our general manager's report, unless I'm missing something. No, I'm not. All right, general manager's report, take it away.
I don't have anything tonight, other than I continue to appreciate the interaction that we're getting on the policy and the research papers. And 12 hours from now, I'll be in the car driving to Cass Lake for the tribal relations training, so I'm ready to go home.
Indeed. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.